thank you for the opportunity to come and visit with you today. My name's Karl Hoopes. I am a veterinarian. I'm also the equine specialist here at USU. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the importance of a balanced foot. Everybody that has a horse has a farrier come out, and it's important that we understand, first of all, what they're trying to accomplish, what they need to accomplish, and be able to recognize when a horse has an unbalanced foot, to be sure. So to begin with, what is a balanced foot? What is the definition of a balanced foot? We need to be really careful with this because there is no universal definition. Each hoof is an individual and we have to treat it as such. Obviously, we want them to look good, but more importantly, we want them to function correctly. And each horse is an individual as well as each foot. The goals of a balanced foot is to make sure that the trim job has no undue stresses on any part of the limb. The foot should contact the ground evenly and load evenly, and all of the internal structures need to be able to function correctly. All right, let's do a little bit of anatomy before we get into balance so that we're all on the same page. And this is just a cross section of a horse's foot, cut right down the middle. We have several bony structures that are in the foot. We have the cannon bone, the long pastern bone, the short pastern, and then when we get down into the hoof itself, we have the coffin bone, and that's that triangular shaped bone right there at the bottom. We also have the navicular bone, and that's that small square shaped bone there at the bottom underneath the other bones. We have the hoof wall that runs along the outside, and we have the sole that's on the bottom side of that hoof, as well as the digital cushion. That digital cushion is made up of fatty fibrocartilage tissue that is there to protect these structures underneath it. We're looking at the bottom of the foot. This structure, the V-shaped structure there, triangular shaped structure, is called the frog. The frog is there for protection of the structures that are underneath it, but also there to help pump blood back up through the leg into the heart. We have the toe region, we have the sole region, and then we have the heel region there in the back. So with those anatomical landmarks, let's kind of go ahead. Oh, I forgot, we got to discuss what lamina are. The lamina are the interdigitating epithelial tissue that connects that coffin bone to the hoof wall. And those are extremely important. It's kind of like interdigitating, so different parts of the lamina coming together. You have sensitive on the bone side, insensitive out on the hoof wall side. They're connecting and they keep that bone suspended, kind of like it's in a sling or a hammock. I've often seen people use a trampoline type of an analogy, and the springs that are along the outside are what's keeping it attached to the hoof wall and the hoof there. Okay, so as we look at the biomechanics, or the forces that are put on this horse, obviously we have the pressure from the ground pushing up. We have a couple of different ligaments and tendons that are tied in here. The deep digital flexor tendon comes down and attaches on the bottom or the palmar side of that foot. And we have here on the dorsal aspect, we have the extensor tendons and ligaments attaching out there. So the extensive forces. We also have right here is gravity bringing that foot down, the weight of the horse pushing down. So we'll keep those in mind as we're looking at some of the biomechanics and balance here. So when we're looking at balance, we look at a few different views. We have to look at the outside. So we're looking at the outside, we look at a side view, and we also look at a front view. We have to be able to evaluate the front and the back of the foot as well as each side. There are other parts that require us to look at the inside of the foot. And that's what an x-ray is good for. We don't always have an x-ray, but when it's needed, we take the horse to the veterinarian, and in conjunction with your farrier, you're able to look at some things there to really know what's going on the inside. So here's some things to consider. And I know there's a lot here. There's 8 different points that we look at when we're talking about balance of the foot. And we'll go through each one of these kind of, pretty quick to see and to show you what we're talking about. But we have the center of rotation, the hoof pastern axis, hoof wall distortion, breakover, sole depth, palmar angle, heel support, and medial lateral symmetry. All things that we look at. All right, so when we're talking about the center of rotation, we're trying to look at that spot. I'll go to the next slide for just a second. They've identified that spot right in the middle of that short pastern, and they draw a line straight to the ground. So we go back. This correlates with the widest part of that horse's foot. That's the most weight bearing. That's the site where the majority of that horse's weight is coming down. And so the foot is compensated, and that's where the largest support is, the largest amount of support. So the widest part of that horse's foot, we like to call it, we have a 50% rule. We want 50% of the weight bearing surface in the front part as well as the back part of that horse's foot. And we'll see some examples here in a second of where that's not the case, but that helps so the foot can support the weight of the horse. There's a few names that you may have heard at some point in time called Duckett's Dot and Duckett's Bridge. These are just landmarks that shoers, horse and farriers are looking at to be able to identify that weight-bearing spot on a horse. And they're pretty good at it, and they're pretty good at locating that spot and identifying where that 50% rule would be. All right, so we look at the hoof pastern axis. Now, if we look here on the left, a normal hoof pastern axis is going to be a straight line from the fetlock all the way down through that coffin bone. Okay, we have some that are called broken back, and these are generally a low heel and a long toe horse, where that axis is not straight and the hoof pastern axis is backwards, is broken back. We have one called broken forward. This is more of your club-footed horse that has a high heel and a shorter toe. And that, there again, those, if it's not a proper alignment of those bones, we're predisposing this horse to arthritis. We're looking, many of us have heard about ring bone, but that ring bone is arthritis through those pastern bones. And if we get those things, it's pretty hard to look at. We look at some examples here. This one horse here in the middle, I've got the red line and the yellow line. That's indicating, the yellow line is indicating that hoof axis pastern is pretty straight. And you can see that the hoof wall is almost completely parallel to that hoof axis, that hoof pastern axis. If we look at the horse here in the middle, the darker horse here, you can really see an underrun heel that's long, and the hoof pastern axis is broken back. The horse clear on the far right, this is a broken forward or a club-footed horse. You can see those conformation problems. As you're able to look here, you can see those angles. This is a pretty straight angle here of the hoof pastern axis. And as you can see, that hoof wall is pretty straight as well. This is a good foot angle. We look at and this is how they measure that horse's angle of that coffin bone. Okay. You're able to see the heel angle is the same or almost completely parallel to both the hoof pastern axis and that front hoof wall. And you're able to visualize the coronary band there as well. Okay, for second, and there's no really particular order, but next we look at the hoof distortion. And this is where we get into problems with the laminar connection. So the lamella, the interdigitating epithelial. If we have disruption of that connection, then we can get a lot of flares where the hoof wall is actually pulling away from the coffin bone, causing a hoof distortion. So that's something that we're looking at as well. They're looking at heel support. So you want that heel to extend to the base of the frog. to provide enough support back there. The heel angle should also be parallel to the dorsal hoof wall, as you can see there on the right. If you look at this one, you look at that angle of the heel. And first of all, that heel support is very run forward here. It's not to the back of the base of that frog. And so we're putting a lot of pressure on the front part of that foot. And it starts to give some rotation. The angle, that heel angle, is not parallel to that dorsal hoof wall. And so this would be a case of really an unbalanced foot as far as the heel support would go. We look at medial lateral balance, okay? And what you do is you draw a line straight down through the middle of that foot from the heel to the toe. From the heel to the toe. And then you compare inside and outside. Medial side is on the inside. Lateral side is on the outside. Now, they don't have to be exact. We want them to be, you're going to see some differences, but we want them looking pretty symmetrical. As you can see this one, over on the right side of the page here, this one flares out a little bit more. Pretty common in a lot of our horses that we're seeing a little bit more flare on the lateral aspect or the outside of that horse's foot. Okay, now we've talked about some of the things you see from the outside. Now we're going to talk just a few things about those on the inside that you have to look at with an x-ray. And one thing I want to really emphasize today is that relationship with your veterinarian and your farrier is truly important to be able to truly understand the balance of that foot. The veterinarian has access to the x-rays and the knowledge to be able to take those x-rays and help interpret some of the things that are going on there. The veterinarian is going to take that information and help make adjustments to this horse's foot to give it proper balance and give this horse longer life. Okay, so a term here that you may hear is breakover, and it's the point where that foot actually leaves the ground, and that breakover is that leverage point. We find that true breakover by drawing a line straight down on the dorsal aspect of that coffin bone, and where that intersects with the ground is where we want that breakover to be. Okay, so breakover is important. If it's too long, as you can imagine, it's going to take a lot of pressure on those ligaments, tendons, and the bony structures to force that foot over that breakover point. And so if it's brought back, it takes a lot less force to do that. When we have x-rays, we're able to evaluate sole depth. A lot of times, those farriers are going to be looking at the bottom of that foot. It's going to appear bruised. It's going to appear very thin. Excuse me. And they're going to have an extremely, well, they're going to be nervous about cutting into it at all, because if you look at this top one here, very thin sole, and that's going to be sensitive tissue, not very far under the surface. If you look at the bottom, that's a more healthy sole depth, and we're going to be able to see how much we can actually manipulate and change that foot. We look at the palmar angle, and this is when we're trying to determine a natural angle is what's here in the middle, 3 to 5 degree rise. We're looking at the coffin bone right there, and we're looking at the angle from the ground up. If it's too flat or if it's too steep, you're going to see problems with that horse. They're going to experience a lot more pain. They're not going to bear weight like they should. Oops, I keep pushing the wrong button here. I wanted to show you the value of an x-ray. As a veterinarian, this is pretty near and dear to my heart. I also was a horseshoer through college, put myself through college in that way. It wasn't until I got to be a veterinarian that I was truly able to understand the value of an x-ray and how it helps horseshoers or farriers, and how they're able to utilize that to better, make sure the balance of that horse's foot is correct. These nails that you see in this x-ray are just markers so that we can visualize the outside. We just tape that nail onto the horse's hoof, so we're able to visualize the outside layer there. Then on the bottom is just a small nail that's put in. Really, that was the farrier trying to judge the center of rotation. And he did very well, because you take that point right in the center of that short pastern bone and drop it down. And he did very well in his estimation of where that should be. But when we get these x-rays, we then look at a lot of different things to truly understand the balance of that horse's foot. So we look at the red lines. This is your hoof pastern axis. And as you can see, this one is broken back just a little bit. It's not a straight line. And so we see that problem. The blue line is able to indicate the sole depth. This horse has really good sole depth. There's a good healthy hoof there, good healthy sole that we're able to manipulate and do the things we need to be able to get the proper angle or the proper balance on this horse. We look at this hoof, or the breakover point. We draw that line straight down. And as you can see, where our desired breakover point is about 3/4 of an inch behind where the current breakover point is. And so that horse's foot is, there's a lot of pressures on these soft tissues back here at the back of this horse's hoof as he's trying to force that foot over. We look at the center of rotation here. We've drawn that line straight down, and that shows you really that indicator where he put that nail was very close. But we don't have a 50-50 balance. Here we've got 33 and 66, so a 1/3, 2/3 balance. This horse is really long in the toe. There's a lot of pressure going on there. We look at this palmar angle, and right here, this horse is a little flat, only a 1 to 2 degree angle there on that palmar angle. I would like to see him tipped up just a little bit. That is also indicative of our broken back hoof pastern axis, that when we see them broken back, they generally have a low heel. And so when we're looking at this horse, what do we have? Our hoof pastern axis is broken back. Our breakover point is really long. Our anterior posterior balance, our 50-50, is not correct from that center of rotation. And so what we're able to see is this horse needs a trim. We need to bring that breakover point back. We need to get more heel support. And we probably need to put a wedge in this horse's heel to lift that up to correct this hoof pastern axis. And those things are going to help this horse have a longer life, be a lot more flexible, and a lot less sore in a lot of its activities. Well, that went pretty quick. So I do have quite a bit of time for some questions here. Go ahead. What have we got?
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Hoopes. Just a reminder to write some of those questions into the Q&A. And we do have one that came up. So what is the general or average cost to do x-rays on the horse's hoof? And how would you do that as far as that relationship between your farrier and your veterinarian?
Okay. Average cost, it's going to vary depending upon where you're at. Each vet clinic is going to be a little bit different. They could be so much as just $25 a shot, all the way up to $50 to $100 per film. And usually you're going to need 4 films per horse: front feet, a front view, and a side view. Those are really what they're going to be able to determine. How do you work that with your farrier and your veterinarian? That is an excellent question. Every veterinarian and farrier should have a good relationship. It's not always that case, and too often there is competition and or friction between the two. But as an owner, you have the right to say, hey, or talk to your farrier and say, do you think we need these x-rays? As a veterinarian, I worked with a lot of different farriers, and I loved working with them. I loved involving them. I like to have them bring the owner bring the horse to the clinic. We shoot the x-rays. Then I bring the owner and the farrier and me as the veterinarian together, all of us looking at the x-rays together, all of us trying to figure out what is best for this horse. Now, luckily, most horses aren't sore. Most horses don't have problems. But when we have a lameness, 90% of the time it's in that horse's foot. And we need to be able to find out what's wrong, but then make a change to that horse so that we can correct the problem. And it takes all three, the horse, the owner, the farrier, and the veterinarian to get that working correctly.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you took a minute and explained it like that, and how someone would actually go about that relationship between the farrier and the veterinarian. A question that just came in is, how do you find a good farrier?
That is an excellent question, because we do not have a licensing requirement for farriers in the United States. A lot of the European countries do. And as such, they require a lot more education for their farriers. Like as a veterinarian, I'm required to do some undergraduate, then I'm required to go to a 4-year college or university, an actual professional vet school, and then I can go out and practice as a veterinarian. Now, a farrier, anybody can actually just throw their advertisement out and say, hey, I'm a farrier, I'll come shoe your horse. So it is difficult. Things that you need to look for: they need to be knowledgeable. They need to be able to understand some of these principles of balance. Second of all, and in no particular order, they've got to be good with horses. They got to be able to talk with, communicate with that horse and make sure that they understand that. They've got to have a willingness to learn. I don't care if it's a kid that just put a few shoes on. If he's willing to learn and willing to grow, I'd much rather have him than somebody that, hey, I've done it this way for 100 years and it's going to stay this way for 100 years. We've got to be able to look at ourselves and grow. It is difficult. There's not a website to go to say, hey, these are all good farriers. There is a certification process. And they can be, the Utah Horseshoers Guild is the shoeing entity here in Utah. They are very big on continuing education, on growing as a profession and doing well. I want to caution against saying, oh, only a certified farrier will put shoes on my horse. There are a lot of good farriers out there that are not certified. When you start looking at that certification, they're talking, a big part of that is making shoes, blacksmithing, and all of that stuff. There's a lot of good farriers out there that understand hoof balance and take care of that horse's foot that are not certified. So yes, a certified farrier has demonstrated they know it and they are doing very well, but there's a lot of individuals that have not gone through that certification process that still are very qualified and very good at what they do.